And we are getting going. Hopefully everybody had a good night. Once again, I will today, let's move the camera up, folks. There we are, moving up in the world. Today, I am going to give you the afternoon to work. I'll also have a optional meet this afternoon, same time as yesterday, 12:30 to 1:30. And I'll just be here if you want to jump on and ask any questions. I also have all of your earlier formative work marked and ready to hand back, so I'll fire that back to you so you've got some feedback on the formative work that you've done for me before you hand in your Elizabeth essay for me tomorrow. Today, let's start talking about absolutism. Absolutism is the this intellectual movement that arises in the 17th century, middle of the 17th century, that really, much like we talked about yesterday, with all these other changes in the 17th century, notice that we didn't talk a lot about politics, right? We talked about economics, we talked about agriculture, we talked about the lives of people. We didn't talk about politics. And the reason for that is because absolutism in and of itself is a big enough topic for us to really sort of focus in on. And we want to look at that and get an idea of where we're going. Before we do that, though, let's kind of get our head around where we are in terms of the chronological history of the course, okay? Because again, it's important for us to sort of understand all this. Let me move this in a little bit. Whoop, make it, there you go. There you go. All right, so if we have a timeline of history, all right, here's our timeline. So our course started, pardon me, mommy. Our course started, let's say 1400, back here. So we've got 1400, 1500, 1600, 1700. All the stuff we talked about yesterday was 17th century stuff. So all that stuff was right here, right? So that's the agricultural production, that's the women in witchcraft, and so on and so forth. Let's put all these things, though, on our timeline and look at where we are. First of all, we have got up to here, we have the Renaissance. So the Renaissance begins prior to in about the late 1300s and goes all the way up to the early 1500s. Remember, Michelangelo carves the statue of David in the early 1500s. The Mona Lisa is created in the early 1500s. So here we have the Renaissance happening all the way up to the 1500s. Starting in 1517, all the way across to 1648, we have the Reformation. And that's 1517 to 1648. And again, these date bars are given by historians. The people that were living at this point in time didn't wake up all of a sudden on November the 1st, 1517, because Martin Luther nails his 95 Theses October the 31st, 1517. They didn't wake up on November the 1st, 1517 and go, wow, it's the Reformation. These are terms that historians have given after the fact, looking back at this. But we've got the Reformation from 1517 to 1648. As part of the Protestant Reformation, remember, Henry VIII creates the Church of England in 1532. So as part of all that, we have then the reign of Queen Elizabeth I from 1558, back here, from 1558 to 1603. Here we have Elizabeth I. Okay, so that time period is overlapping with our Renaissance time period. I'm going to add on a few pieces that we haven't done yet. I'm going to put those in a different color because we're going to talk about these on Monday and on Tuesday. The scientific revolution will begin as part of the Reformation. So as part of the Catholic Church's counter-reformation, which we'll talk about on Monday, the Catholic Church begins to try and change a number of things to increase their cash flow. And as part of that, they hired Nicholas Copernicus, who is a priest and a scientist, to fix the calendar. And we'll talk about what all that means on Monday. But when he fixes the calendar, he inadvertently starts the scientific revolution. So the scientific revolution begins in 1543 with the publication of On the Revolution of the Heavenly Bodies by Nicholas Copernicus. So 1543, just prior to Elizabeth I coming into power, the scientific revolution then goes all the way, so we'll call that the Sci Rev, and that's 1543 to 1687. So now we're overlapping the Scientific Revolution on top of the Reformation, and then on top of that, we have the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment begins as part of the Protestant Reformation, as part of the Scientific Revolution as well. Part of that begins early 1600. That overlaps all the way. So the Enlightenment goes from 1600, roughly, to 1789. So where we are right now with absolutism is somewhere in that jumbled mess over here, where we've got a whole bunch of events all happening at the same time. Elizabeth and the Scientific Revolution. So the Spanish Armada is happening right here in 1588. But we've also got the Enlightenment that's beginning. We're not going to talk about that yet. We've got the Scientific Revolution beginning. We're not going to talk about that yet. We've got the Reformation happening. We've already finished talking about that. Like I said at the very first day, there's a lot of things that are happening. And we study history in a linear way, but we can't really study the depth of history, all the different levels that are all happening at the same time, which is all going on here. It's a very, very dynamic time period. And a lot of things are changing. Absolutism fits into this section right here. So where does absolutism start? Absolutism starts right here, where the Reformation ends. I'm going to put a line up here. Where the Reformation ends, absolutism starts there in 1648. So from 1648, right here, we have got absolutism. And that's 1648 to 1789. One thing I want you to note as we're looking at this, and we're going to talk about why it starts in 1648 and why the Reformation stops in 1648, but one thing I want you to note, just jumping ahead in our story, is, if I could take my ruler here, you'll note that even though we are overlapping all these time periods here, everything comes to a hard stop right there. And it comes to a hard stop in 1789. What happens in 1789? Anybody?
The French Revolution.
There we go. So all of these events that we're talking about, thank you, all the events that we're talking about, all of these various things are all now leading us towards this climactic, cataclysmic, catastrophic event in 1789 that is going to, and as many historians have said, this line right here, okay, I'll make that even darker, this line right here is the dividing line for many historians between the pre-modern period and the modern period in which we find ourselves living today. So that's why that's actually, this has worked out really great the way this whole COVID thing is going. Our first part of our course is this jumbled mess behind me, all leading towards, oh, this event in 1789. When we come back in 2 weeks on June the 3rd, we're going to start with the French Revolution, and then we're going to rampage off from the French Revolution through Napoleon, through the Industrial Revolution, through the rise of Germany, the rise of Italy, liberalism, communism, imperialism in Europe, and nationalism and militarism, and then for the First World War. And the First World War will lead to the Russian Revolution, will lead to the rise of fascism, will lead to the Second World War, and kablam, we're done the course. So, absolutism. Where does all this come from? We have to go back to why there is this line here in 1648. Notice that the Protestant Reformation ends 1648 and absolutism begins in 1648. There is one other event that, much like we've got over there at the end of the course, or the end of our first block here, where we've got all these events that are coming together, we've got Elizabeth and we've got the Reformation, sort of all these things happening that are all sort of combining to lead to one event here in 1648. What precedes the rise of absolutism is the 30 Years' War. So the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. I'm going to erase all this now. Okay, can always go back, and beauty of recording things, you can always go back and look at it later if you want to see that again. But the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, is caused by the Protestant Reformation. And here we have it. Like we said before, in Europe, in the center part of Europe, there is the entity known as the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the Holy Roman Northern Empire, but it's in the middle, and it encompasses all of this area here. Okay, so all of Belgium, all of Holland, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Italy, Austria, Germany, part of Poland, part of the Czech Republic, part of Austria, part of the Balkans, etc. The Holy Roman Empire is where the Protestant Reformation begins in 1517. It spreads fairly rapidly with Zwingli and Calvin and Menno Simons and Jacob Hutter and Jan Hus and a number of other Protestant leaders breaking away from the Catholic Church. Now, to slow down the impact of the Protestant Reformation, to slow it all down, because it's raging like a pandemic or a wildfire, or whatever metaphor you want to use. It's raging across all of Europe. England has left, right? To slow this all down, Emperor Charles V, who we've already talked about, Emperor Charles V in 1555, passes an edict. And an edict is a royal proclamation. So it has the power of law. It's not a law, because a law implies that there is a legal body in which people can then debate and so on and so forth. In an absolute monarchy, to a certain extent, you don't have any sort of debate about this. So an edict is a royal proclamation. Many of you have probably heard of President Biden and President Trump and so on using what are called executive orders. So they sign all these things. That's when Trump gets out his Sharpie and goes like this, and he pulls up a piece of this folder that goes, there you go, I've now allowed drilling in the Alaskan Wildlife Reserve by executive order. An executive order is the modern version of an edict. So it simply bypasses the legislative bodies and says, we're now doing this. So 1555, Charles I puts into effect the Edict of Nantes. 1555, let's put this into context. 1558 is when Elizabeth I will become the Queen of England. So we're right before her reign. We are now just under 40 years after Martin Luther has nailed his 95 Theses at the church door. We're 55 years after Michelangelo has painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling. So we're still near the very start of our course, even though we are now on like day 6 of our course. We are right near the start of the course. 1555, the Edict of Nantes is passed. And it acknowledges the fact that Lutheranism is a viable alternative to Catholicism, because you can't put that genie back in the bottle. You can't roll time back. So the Edict of Nantes says, and I'll put this into the Latin for you. No. Yep. Eius relio, eius religio. That's what this says. Huh? I can do the Latin. So, eius relio, eius religio. Whomever rules, this is the word rules, whoever rules his religion. And what this says is, if you're, let's put this into a Canadian context, an Ontario context. Let's say that you guys live in Cambridge. So you live in Cambridge, the Duke of Cambridge. If the Duke of Cambridge is a Lutheran, what that means is the Duke, whoever rules, okay, the Duke of Cambridge, he is Lutheran, therefore his religion is all of your religion. So everybody in Cambridge from this point forward has to be Lutheran. But the Baron of Kitchener is Catholic, which means anybody who lives in Kitchener has to be Catholic. And the Earl of Guelph is a Lutheran. Everybody in Guelph has to be a Lutheran at that point. All right. But the Baron of Hamilton is Catholic. Therefore, everybody in Hamilton is Catholic. Whoever rules his religion. So this then says you can be Lutheran or Catholic, no other alternatives, no other options. That's all you can do. And this now subdivides up the Holy Roman Empire into 2 armed camps, Protestant and Catholic, Lutheran and Catholic. Now, what this leads to then is, let's say that you're living here in Cambridge, and I just said that the Duke of Cambridge is a Lutheran, but you are a die-hard Catholic. and you don't want to be a Lutheran. Well, where can you go then? You can go live with the Baron of Kitchener. So what this leads to is people now in the Holy Roman Empire beginning to move and gravitate towards areas where their religious beliefs reflect the religious beliefs of the particular leader. It's not a bad solution to the problem, right? It allows Charles V to stop all this rebellion, all these people, flocking away and people springing up and creating their own churches. It makes illegal the Mennonites and the Hutterites and the Zwingliites and the Calvinites and all those other groups. None of those groups are allowed to exist, and they get prosecuted with severe brutality by Charles V. Like, for example, Jan Hus, who in the northern city in the Holy Roman Empire, the name of the city escapes me right now, but Jan Hus declares that city a reformed city, and he is the leader of the Hussites. These are the people that are now going to follow him. So much like the people that follow Luther are Lutherans, the people that follow Menno Simons are Mennonites, the people that follow Jan Hus are Hussites. Well, Charles V has just said, no, you can be Lutheran or you can be Catholic, but we're not letting anybody else in. So what Charles V does then is Charles V goes in to that city. It's not Munich. It'll come to me. He goes into that city. München, that's the name of the city. M-U with an umlaut, N-C-H-E-N. The city is declared a reformed city. It's declared a Protestant city away from the powers of the Catholic Church. Charles V brings the imperial army into that city and butchers everybody. Everybody is killed by Charles V in that particular city. All the men are killed. All the women are killed. All the children are killed. The city itself is burned to the ground by Charles V. Again, I said he's a very, very ruthless leader. Everybody's killed except for Jan Hus, who is slowly killed over 3 days using a particularly brutal medieval execution called death by red hot tongs. And to give you a sense of what that means, when you take metal and you heat it up, and you can tell the temperature of metal by the color of the metal. So when you have your pots and pans on a stove and the water inside is boiling, that's 100 degrees Celsius, about 180 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll notice that the color of your pots don't really change, right? There's a bit of a change. They get slightly a slightly different color, but they still remain silver or whatever. Gray. They don't change color. In order to actually start to see a change in color in the metal, you have to get that temperature up to around 300 degrees. And if you'll notice inside your oven, when you put your oven on to 300 or 350, the filament at the top starts to glow like a dull red. Well, that's about 300 degrees Celsius or 350 degrees Celsius. When you get metal up to around 900 or 1,000 degrees Celsius, that goes from a red, like a dull, angry red, to a bright red, to a yellow. So like the sun, right? So you start to see this yellowish, almost white color coming through when it's about 1,000 degrees Celsius. And when it gets to about 1,150 degrees Celsius, it'll become incandescent white, and then it will start to break apart because you've actually destroyed the metal. Once it gets, metal can only go to about 1,150 or 1,200 degrees Celsius, then it starts to fall apart. Back when I was a boy, I was a blacksmith for a while. So I did blacksmithing. Shoeing horses and such, and I did it at Dune Heritage Crossroads, which is the museum, the historical Mennonite pioneer village that some of you probably went to when you were in elementary school. So I did the blacksmithing there for about 4 years, and this is all part of the story. I'm not getting sidetracked. This is all part of this story. One of the things that I would do is I would, make horseshoes. I would shoe the horses that are on site. I would make things like trivets and pots and I made. If any of you ever go to the Dune, the museum's winter festival that they have. So you go there at nighttime and you wander through the village, and they give you hot cider and so on, and you get to hear carols, and you see a 1914 type Christmas. You'll notice that there are lanterns that are spread all the way throughout the village, and these lanterns are hanging on these decorative metal poles. Well, I made all 70 of those decorative metal poles back in 97 or something. Anyway, so that's the kind of stuff that I did. With metal, when you get it really, really hot, it becomes actually quite soft. And in an anvil, which you've all seen before, you know, being dropped by Bugs Bunny on someone's head, in an anvil, there are, so here you have an anvil, right? You got an anvil that you can use. This part here is for rounding metal and for doing various things. So you take the horseshoes, for example, and you work the horseshoes around that. You can hammer it out. This is a flat part where you can work the metal. But there's also a little cutout, like a little gap here in the anvil. And that cutout is for tools that you can put into the anvil to work the metal. One of those tools is a pretty handy thing that looks like an arrowhead. That's a cutoff. And you use that for when you want to cut a piece of metal. So let's say you got a piece of metal that's 10 feet long. You only want it to be 3 feet long. So you take that, you put it into the fire, you turn the blower, you get the fire up to 1500 degrees. The metal starts to heat up, and once that metal gets to around 800 or 900 degrees, so it's that bright yellow I talked about before, it's soft. It's as soft as like an overdone steak. So it's pretty easy to get through. You take that piece of metal, this part here is all the hot part of the metal. You take that, you put it over the cutoff piece, you take your hammer and you hit it right here or right here, and this arrow will just cut right through the metal like a knife through butter. It's awesome. Works out really well. I came back from being off for a couple of days, and people weren't supposed to use my stuff. Like, if I'm not there, the blacksmith shop is open, but the fires aren't going, don't touch my stuff. I came back one day, and somebody had been messing around with things and tried to cut a piece of metal, but they hadn't cut the piece of metal when it was hot enough. So what happened was, as they were pounding on top of this, it ruined the cutoff, and the cutoff piece was now damaged like that, which made me really angry, because I need that piece to do all the work that I'm doing. So for the whole day, what I had to do is I had to take this piece of metal, I had to stick it into the fire, because in order to work it, you've got to bring the entire piece up above the temper point. And the temper point is around 600 degrees Celsius, where you can actually solidify the metal and keep the properties the way that they are, the molecules all align, etc. I had to bring it up past 600 degrees, get the temperature out of it, and then start reworking this piece of metal to try and draw it back out to a point again. It was a long, hot, angry day for me. It was about 33 degrees outside. I'm sitting inside an enclosed hut with a 1500 degree coal fire going, just drenched in sweat, pounding on this piece of metal, angry at this idiocy that I had to deal with. Getting near the end of the day, tourists are coming through, by the way, and they're talking to me, and I'm talking to them. I'm like, hi, yeah, I'm just, working on I'm a blacksmith, blah, 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 doing my whole spiel. Getting near the end of the day, it's around 4:30. Dune closes at 5. And I wasn't done yet on this piece of metal. I hadn't got it back to the point I needed it back to. And if I let it go overnight, what would happen is the metal would cool down. It wouldn't have a temper in it. I'd have to start the next day, heat the whole thing back up again, which takes about 2 or 3 hours, and then start working all over again. I didn't really want to do that, but I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go fast enough. So I decided to be a bit creative. And whenever my wife says to me, don't do things that you think are a good idea, because I tend to hurt myself a lot. So I thought this would be a good idea. I'll take this hot piece of metal with tongs. You got to obviously hold with tongs. And I put it into a vise that I had there, this big industrial vise. Put it into a vise, cranked it down, and I took a really heavy-duty rasp, a really heavy-duty file, and I started filing against this piece of metal to try and bring it back to a sharp point. And it was kind of neat, actually, because sparks were going off, and it was kind of cool. But the problem was every time you touch a piece of hot metal with cold metal, it takes some of the heat out of it. So it draws it back down. So you put it into a cold vise, it sucks some of the heat back out of it. So I'm heating this thing up, heating, taking it, putting it into the vise. And you can just see the color bleeding out of it. It's going from it's from yellow to red to dull red to black. It's like, put it back in the fire, heat it back up again. So I'm working on this piece of metal and I thought, okay, I haven't got time to work this side, take it out, turn it around, work the other side. I'm just going to file this side and then I'm going to take the file and file backwards against it. It's about 10 to 5 and these Swedish tourists come in. I don't know why they have to be Swedish for the story. It's true that they were Swedish. I don't know why you care, but these Swedish tourists come in and they're asking me questions about what am I doing, and I'm talking to them and I'm being polite, but I'm just drenched in sweat and I'm exhausted and I'm covered in black smoke. I'm trying to get this thing done and they're over my shoulder and they're talking to me and this thing is glowing like bright red. It means 900 degrees Celsius. And I'm filing off this thing and they asked me, what is this over here? And as I'm filing, I looked at what they were doing and the file slipped and my arm went right against this 900 degree piece of metal. I was like, ah! And I pulled my arm right off it really quick. I was like, And they said, are you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I inadvertently, this is long story short, too late. I inadvertently started the death by red hot tongs by doing that. Because what I did was, when I touched this 900 degree piece of metal, this is really kind of weird. If anybody doesn't like gross stories, pause, turn the mic off right now. So what happened was, when you touch something that hot against skin, it fuses together all 3 layers of skin. You've got 3 layers in your skin. So when I had done that, in that split second where I touched it and then pulled my arm back off, it had fused all 3 layers of my skin. And when I pulled my arm off, it ripped off that part of my skin. And I looked down on my arm and there was this triangular piece where I could see the muscle in my arm because there was no skin left. And I looked at this thing in the vise and there was my skin going just sizzling on the tongue. I'm like, yeah, we're closed for the day. I gotta go. Really painful, really painful. You can't see it because the things aren't good, but I've got a neat little scar here on my arm from that. Jan Hus is killed by death with red hot tongs. What they did was they tied this guy to a stake naked, and for 3 days they would heat tongs up and they would touch a part of his body and pull the tongs off. And they essentially flayed this guy alive by pulling off all of his skin over 3 days. And anytime he would pass out from pain or exhaustion, they would take vinegar or they would take pickle brine and pour it on the wounds. And his whole body would just explode in fire. He'd wake up screaming. They're like, oh, good, you're back. And they keep pulling off the skin. Really horrific death for Jan Hus. This is to say that the 1555 Peace of Augsburg was meant as a hard line in the sand. You are either Lutheran or you are Catholic. You cannot be either anything else. And the Holy Roman Emperor would enforce that rule with absolute brutality. Okay, good then. So the 1555 Peace of Augsburg sort of solved all the religious problems. Why do we have the 30 Years' War then? I'll tell you why, folks. It's a great question. I'll tell you why. I know it's burning in your minds. What happened is, over time, because like I said, if you're living here in Cambridge, you got to be Lutheran. If you're living in Guelph or living in Kitchener, you got to be Catholic. Well, people begin to gravitate towards their areas. So by 1618, what we have then is the northern part of the Holy Roman Empire is predominantly Lutheran, and the southern part of the Holy Roman Empire is predominantly Catholic, because people have gravitated. Lutherans have gone north, Catholics have gone south, and you've got the Holy Roman Empire now essentially split into 2 entities: a Lutheran or Protestant, half, third, and a Catholic, 2/3. Which also means, if you remember, the Holy Roman Emperor is elected to the position of emperor. There are 7 electors: Prague, Vienna, Berlin, Rome. When the emperor dies, the 7 electors get together and they choose who the next emperor is going to be. Well, in 1618, the Holy Roman Emperor died. The electors now have to get together and choose, but by 1618, because of the 1555 Peace of Augsburg, you've got 4 that are Catholic and 3 that are Lutheran. The 3 Lutherans don't want another Catholic Holy Roman Emperor. The 4 Catholics sure as hell don't want a Lutheran Holy Roman Emperor. So what happens is that the 4 Catholics elect to the position of the Emperor Ferdinand II, who is the son of the old Holy Roman Emperor. So now you've got a Catholic emperor. But the 3 Lutheran electors say no, and they elect their own Protestant emperor called Ferdinand. So now you've got an Emperor Ferdinand of the Holy Roman Empire who's Lutheran in Prague, and an Emperor Frederick of the Holy Roman Empire in Vienna who's Catholic. Well, you can't have 2. It's like Highlander says, there can only be 1. So a war erupts between the northern Protestants that are following Frederick, and the southern Catholics who are following Ferdinand. And the Holy 30 Years' War erupts. And it is a brutal war. A third of all Central Europeans are killed during this war. It goes on for 30 years, draws in the French, draws in the Swedish, draws in the Danes. It is a massive, massive, horrific war that really, ultimately, at the end of the day, doesn't solve anything. But what it does do is it creates such a power vacuum in the middle of Europe. It creates such a hostility and tension that it ultimately destroys the integrity of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire will now be a burned out shell that will limp along until Napoleon finally obliterates it in 1804. But the power of the emperor is gone. There is no more Holy Roman Emperor after 1648. What you have then is the beginnings of modern imperial families like the Habsburgs and the Hohenzollerns and so on. But this war that is so catastrophic changes the power dynamic in all of Central Europe, and people begin to look for an alternative to leaders that are simply ones that follow their religious points of view. And what this gets us to then is the rise of absolutism. By the way, little side note, travel tip number 8. The 30 Years' War begins in the city of Prague, which is my favorite city in all of Europe to go to. Absolutely my favorite city. Some people really like Paris. Some people really like Rome. Prague is amazing. It's a great city to go to. Very much worth your while if you're ever in the Czech Republic. Go to Prague. A couple things about that. A couple of little side notes. There are a number of tourist sites in Prague that you'll have to see if you do one of those tours. You're there for a day and you're gone. There's 2 things. One, you'll see the astronomical clock. And the second thing you'll probably see is the Bridge of Sighs, as it's referred to, which is extraordinarily... anybody here, if you've got Google Home on your TV, you know how Google Home just cycles through pictures from, there's fancy pictures and there's Google satellite pictures. There's a picture that shows up on Google Home of the Bridge of Sighs, which is, let me just go here, see if I can find it for you. There we go. There we go. Okay, open image in new tab. There we go. Oh, presents tab. That's the wrong one. Sorry, folks. As good as I am on occasion with technology, I'm also not so good with the technology. Here we go. So this bridge here. Okay, in the background there, you see the old city, and then behind the bridge is the new city. This bridge, absolutely extraordinary. Some of you may have seen a picture like this on Google Home if you've got one. Or a Google Chromecast is what I meant. Beautiful, beautiful bridge. You'll notice that all the way along this bridge, there are these statues that are created. There is a, all along here, when you go, here's your travel tip. When you go there, there'll be people that are selling postcards and beautiful pictures of Prague. Don't buy them on the bridge. folks, because just like in Vienna, in the Piazza San Marco, the prices of things on the bridge are 3 times as expensive as the prices of things in off the bridge. So go off this bridge, go 2, 3, 4 blocks elsewhere, and you'll find much cheaper versions of whatever it is you're going to find on this bridge. But it's a really cool bridge to walk across, spend time on. There's all these little cutouts, park benches for you to sit on. There's an interesting story that goes with this particular bridge, which is that the king at the time, the Elector of Prague, wanted the bridge built. He put out a like a competition for anybody who wanted to build a bridge. And the architect who won the contract to build the bridge, according to legend, and everything in Europe, especially old Europe, has got legends that are attached to it, right? Like the Golem of Prague and so on, William Tell, everybody's got legends. Well, there's a legend that goes with the Bridge of Sighs, which is that the architect made a deal with the devil. And the deal with the devil was that the architect really wanted this contract. And the devil said, fine, I'll make you talented enough to build the bridge, but I get the soul of the first person that crosses the bridge. And the architect said, great, fine with me, I don't care. Just make sure I don't cross the bridge, I guess, first. And so, according to the legend, the devil said, fine, here's the design for the bridge. And the guy submitted it, and the elector said, I like that bridge. So the guy built it. And when the day came for the bridge to be unveiled, there was obviously people on one side of the bridge, people on the other side of the bridge, and there was like a velvet rope going across it. The architect and the king was on one side, and when the elector snipped the rope and opened the bridge, people from both sides began to cross the bridge. Well, the first person onto the bridge from the other side was the architect's wife, who ran across the bridge to go and congratulate her husband. At that moment, the devil came up from beside the bridge, grabbed the woman, and dragged her over the side and down to her death under the bridge in fulfillment of the deal. And what people say is, to this day, if you go there to Prague, especially at nighttime, and you listen, you can hear the woman sighing under the bridge as she moans in agony, being tortured for all time by the devil. And that's why it's called colloquially the Bridge of Sighs. When you go there, it's neat. And if you sit there at nighttime and you listen, what you hear is this under the bridge. And what it is just kind of neat, the way that the water goes around the columns of the bridge. The sound creates this sighing noise, which is where the story comes from. So it's kind of neat. It's cool to go and see. The other thing that you'll go and see is the astronomical clock at the bridge, which is just off the bridge. And remember on that bridge image I showed you, there was a spiky building in the background. That's where the astronomical clock is. Let me just pull this up. Astronomical clock, Prague. The astronomical clock is one of these hugely popular tourist sites that you want to go to. Open link in new tab. Here we go. Get rid of that one. And every hour on the hour, this astronomical clock goes off. And when it goes off, a number of different things happen. The astronomical clock, here we go. So you can see that. The astronomical clock, you can see the various pieces of it. That's maybe a better picture right there. In the middle there, it tells the time. At the top, you'll notice there are these 2 doors. Well, what happens is when the clock goes off, there's all these little marionettes that come out, and they go around in a circle up there. You see all the 12 disciples come out. You see Time, Father Time comes out. You see Death comes out of there, and they come out and they whirl around and so on. The astronomical clock not only tells the time, but it also tells the seasons, tells the positions of the various phases of the moon and so on and so forth, and you can see it. According to history, this is not according to legend, but the astronomical clock was actually designed by a clockmaker for the Elector of Prague. And when it was done, the Elector of Prague was so pleased by the astronomical clock. By the way, to give you a sense of scale, sense of size, okay, here is a doorway. So a 8-10-foot doorway here leading into the tower. So it gives you a sense, that's 10 feet. So this thing is 30 feet high. It's a massive structure. The Elector was so pleased with the job that was done by the clockmaker that he had the clockmaker's eyes put out as payment. Nice. And the reason for that is he didn't want the clockmaker to design another clock for somebody else that was as nice as his clock. So there you go. I guess the rule of the story is don't make a deal with the devil in Prague and don't make a deal with the elector unless you want to be blind. But here's your travel tip number 8. Okay. It's not worth going to see the astronomical clock go off. It's about 3.5 minutes, and people will sit there. And if you go there at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and tour guides will always sort of time their tours of Prague to be at the astronomical clock at, say, 3 o'clock, so that you can all stand there and you wait for the astronomical clock to go off. And what you'll see is you will see 1,000 or 2,000 people all stand together, all clumped together, going for 3 or 4 minutes watching this astronomical clock go off. Number one, just watch it on YouTube if you want to see it go off. It's impressive to see the actual clock. What it actually does is not that big a deal. If you watch it on YouTube, you'll see what I mean. You look at that and go, really? But why you don't want to go there? Okay, and if you do want to go and see it, I'm always saying to people, hey, this is my opinion. That I don't find certain things impressive, but if you want to go and see it, go and see it. If you go and see it, though, here's your travel tip: take your backpack and put it around your front and hold on to it. If you have a purse, take your purse, hold in your hands. If you've got a wallet and a cell phone, take those, put them in your front pockets and hold onto them tightly. The best place for your phone is not in a back pocket. The best place for your phone is not in a jacket pocket. It is in your front pocket. You've got more nerves in your thighs than you do in your buttocks. You can feel someone reaching into your pocket easier. What happens every day in Prague at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock is while this whole crowd is sitting there going, staring at this astronomical clock, pickpockets go through the crowd, snagging phones, wallets, all kinds of stuff. I've taken 2 tour groups of students to the astronomical clock, and despite the fact that I have warned them, absolutely do not leave your stuff in your back pocket. We're going to watch this, but I'm telling you right now, take whatever you've got and hold it tightly in your hands. Both times I've had a student go, my phone's gone. I'm like, I told you. So that's your travel tip number 9. Why am I telling you any of this? Because in Prague, right by where that astronomical clock is, there's a big tower, huge, high, tall tower. That's the spiky tower that you saw in the bridge picture in the background. Well, in 1618, when the Protestants declare that Ferdinand is the elector, Ferdinand is not their new emperor, but instead they want to have the Lutheran Frederick become the emperor. The Catholic emperor, Ferdinand, sends his representatives to Prague to tell them, no, that guy's not the emperor. You've got to obey the Catholic emperor. The people of Prague are not having any of it, and they attack the envoys of the Catholic emperor. They chase those people all the way to the top of that tall tower in Prague, and then in an act of absolute defiance towards the Catholic Ferdinand, they throw his representatives out this 5th-story window right through the glass to plummet down to the stones below, which, yes, you're correct, Evan, is the defenestration of Prague, the breaking of the windows of Prague. Now, the guys they chuck out of this 5-story window don't die, by the way. Catholics say they don't die because they were saved by angels on their way down to the ground. The Lutherans say they didn't die because they landed in a massive pile of horse manure that was beside the tower, and that's what broke their fall. Regardless, the defenestration of Prague in 1618 launches the 30 Years' War, which will last until 1648, absolutely devastate the Holy Roman Empire, and more importantly, lead to the rise of the ideas of absolutism in France and in England. Okay, so Absolutism, 1648. Absolutism is going to start with and is most affiliated with the reign of Louis XIV of France. Louis XIV of France is the most important absolutist leader for a number of reasons. Ultimately, what Louis XIV will do Because, and again, we have to look at what's going on in general in the history of France. There is a religious war happening in France in the 1600s as well, so prior to the 30 Years' War. There are Huguenots in the south, Protestants in the south, Catholics in the north. There are two different families in France. Two different families in France. The family in the north that has ruled the north of France for, there it is. The family that has ruled the north of France since the 100 Years' War is a family called the Valois family. And they are in the north. They are Roman Catholic. And then the family that is ruling in the south, the most powerful family in the south during the French Civil War, is the Bourbon family. And they are Protestant. The war that's going on in France ends in the 1590s, when the Bourbon family defeats the Valois family. And in a last desperate bid to sort of retain control for Catholics of France, representatives of the north make an offer to the leader of the Huguenots in the south, a guy named Henri of Navarre. Henri of Navarre is offered the crown of France if he converts to Catholicism. So the Valois family say, listen, we'll end the war, we'll let you become the new leader of France, but you got to be Catholic. Now, keep in mind, this is at a time when your faith is everything to you, right? If you are Catholic, that is your identity. That is everything about you. If you are Lutheran, that means everything. So when they sit there and say, listen, we'll make you the king, but you got to change the core beliefs of who you are. What do they think Henri IV is going to do? What do they think this guy, I mean, he's just going to flip to Catholicism just because he wants to become the king? That's exactly what he does. That's exactly. So they offer it to him and he goes, done. And Henri IV of Navarre then becomes Henri IV, the King of France. Done. I'll do that. And when he's asked by his allies, his Protestant friends, why would you do that? He famously responds, because Paris is worth going to Mass. In other words, to become the king, I'll become Catholic. I don't care, because as king, I can do whatever I want. So this marks the beginning. 1597 marks the beginning of the reign of the Bourbon family. The Bourbon family will rule France until 1792. And in 1792, the last Bourbon king, Louis XVI, will have his head chopped off in the Place de la Révolution in France, and that will mark the end of the Bourbon monarchy during the French Revolution. Henri IV of Navarre becomes the first Bourbon king, which is his primary importance is that he becomes the king. He's a Bourbon. His son, okay, Henri IV's son is named Louis, and he is Louis XIII, because there have been 12 other Louis before him. Louis XIII is a slovenly, lazy, dull, useless king. He does not want to be king. He wants to spend all of his time drinking and gambling and hunting and sleeping with various women. And that's what he primarily spends his entire reign doing. Louis XIII will be the king of France from 1613 to 1643. And he will do diddly in terms of being a good king, because he spends all of his time drinking and gambling and hunting and sleeping with various women. What Louis XIII does, though, is two important things. One, he marries a woman named Anne of Austria, who, appropriately enough, is from Austria. Marries Anne of Austria, and she gives birth to a son also named Louis, who's going to be very important in our story. But even more importantly, Louis XIII, being as lazy as he is, decides, I don't really want to rule France. I just want all the benefits of being the ruler of France. So I'm going to let somebody else be in charge. This would be kind of like Jeff Bezos letting somebody else run Amazon. He still gets all the money, he still gets all the power, still gets all the kudos, but he doesn't have any of the work, right? Or Elon Musk going, somebody else run Tesla. I'll just take all the profits. That's what Louis XIII does. Doesn't want to be in charge. Actually, he just nominally wants to be in charge and get all the money. So Louis XIII puts in charge of France a guy by the name of Cardinal Richelieu. If anybody's ever read the Three Musketeers books, Cardinal Richelieu is the bad guy in the Three Musketeers books. Cardinal Richelieu is the man who creates absolutism. What Cardinal Richelieu does, he's a cardinal in the Catholic Church, but he realizes if he's going to have any real power, he has to create a system of monarchy where everybody obeys the king, because he stands in the stead of the king, and he wants all the power. So between 1613 and 1640, he establishes and enforces a very important doctrine which will become known as the divine right of kings. And this is the basis of absolutism. Divine right of kings. Cardinal Richelieu says, kings are created by God. Kings are born to be kings. They're not elected. They don't aspire to that purpose. God chooses the monarch through birth, right? So God creates kings. Ergo, kings are gods on earth. They have all the power. They have all the authority of kings. And all power in the state emanates from the monarch, and all glories in the state emanate back towards the monarch. The divine right of kings can best be visualized like this. At the very top, you have got the king. Well, at the very top, you've got God. So God is at the top of all things. God creates the universe, God, et cetera, et cetera. God chooses the king through birth. So the king is at the top of the pyramid. Under the king, there are three groups of people. And this is going to be important for the French Revolution later on. There are three groups of people. The first group is the clergy. So that's priests and that's nuns and that's that sort of thing. You've got the clergy, then you've got the nobility, which are all the dukes and the barons and so on and so forth, and then you've got everybody else. So I'm just going to say, I'll use the Latin et al, which means and all the rest. Okay, so if you are a cardinal or a bishop or a priest or a nun or a monk, you're part of the clergy. If you are a duke or a baron or an earl or a viscount or a marquis, you are part of the nobility. And if you are none of those things, you're part of the last group. You're everybody else. Each of these groups receive their power from the king. But in exchange, each of these groups has a responsibility back to the king. The clergy, okay? And there's a neat way to remember this because it rhymes. Much like with Henry VIII, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. We can remember what the roles of each of these three groups are by using a little rhyming scheme. So what do the clergy do? The clergy pray for the king. And by this, I don't mean they sit there and say, oh, hopefully the king is doing well and enjoying his hunting and his gambling and his whoring. That's not what they mean. They are, keep in mind, at this point in time, 1600s, the vast majority of people, well up into the 90%, the vast majority of people are illiterate, can't read at all. So if you post a rule or a new law on a signpost somewhere, nobody can read it. Well, how do people find out what the rules are? How do people find out what the new laws are? How do people find out what's going on in France? Well, they all have to go to church every week. So they go to church every week, and at the pulpit, the minister will stand there and he will not only give out the sermon for the week, but he will also say, the king has now decreed, blah, 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 blah. And so they become the voice box. They become the propaganda wing of the monarchy. They speak to all the people every week. So the clergy pray for the king. In mass, they spread the message of the king to all the people. The nobility, their job is to obey the king. And what that means is this group of people will enforce the rules that the clergy tell them are now into effect. So the clergy at church say the king has now decreed everyone has to wear purple polka dotted pants every third Sunday of the month. Whatever. The nobility's job is to then make sure that on that third Sunday of every month, every single person in their baronetcy or their earldom or their dukedom is wearing purple polka dotted pants. Okay, so they obey the rules of the king. They are also they're the enforcement branch of the king. All right. So the clergy pray, the nobility obey. What does everybody else do? Anybody? Think of a rhyming word. Clergy prays, nobility obeys. This group delays. No, good guess, Garrett. I'll give you the first letter. So the clergy prays, nobility obeys. Everybody else?
Pays?
They pay. These are the ones that actually fund the kingdom. So this last group, between church taxes and state taxes, let me actually, to put this in a greater context, to give you an idea of how important this is. This group here, the clergy, pay about 1% tax on all their land. All their land, all the money they make, they pay about 1% tax. This group here, the nobility, pays about 4% tax. Bit more, not much. This last group, %90 of all the money they make goes directly to the king. So if you're making $100,000 a year, you're actually taking home 10 grand. $90,000 is going to the state. That's crazy. In Canada today, by the way, the top tax bracket is around 30%. So it gives you an idea of just how much money these guys are kicking back to the state. So all the power flows down from the king. All of the wealth and the status comes back up to the king. And this is what creates absolutism, because the king, therefore, is the benefactor of and the repository of all things in France. Really importantly, when we get to the French Revolution, this group, because there's three of them, this group here, the clergy, are referred to as the first estate. The nobility are referred to as the second estate. And this last group are called the third estate. And there was a document in 1789 that's going to come out that says, what is the third estate? That's going to spark the French Revolution. So ironically, the very idea that creates, the very concept here that creates absolutism in the early 1600s is going to be the same structure that is going to undermine absolutism with the creation of this estate group called the Third Estate. Cardinal Richelieu then does a number of different things in order to enforce the power of the king. He bans a thing called the Estates General, which means that the clergy, the nobility, do not have any more voice in government. He establishes the first French colonies. So Samuel de Champlain heads off to Quebec in 1608 under Cardinal Richelieu, 1607, and then founds Quebec City in 1608. The oldest still established European city in the Western Hemisphere is Quebec City. No other European city is as old as that in the West. He nationalizes or centralizes the French language. Cardinal Richelieu. You might think, well, What the hell's that got to do with absolutism? Everybody has to speak the same language, because if you all speak the same language, using the same words, using the same grammar, then there can't be any misinterpretation or misunderstanding of what a particular decree means or what a particular rule means, right? So he establishes the French Navy. He establishes the first French universities. So the Sorbonne is created under Cardinal Richelieu in order to educate people in this new system. Cardinal Richelieu is absolutely instrumental in centralizing all the power in France in the guise of Louis the 13th. Now, Louis the 13th, like I said, not a great king. Fairly weak guy, more interested in gambling and drinking than doing anything else. But when he dies in 1643, when he dies, his son, Louis the 14th, will become the absolute monarch, and he is born for that role. He is strong, he is intelligent, he is smart, he is cunning, he is determined, he is ruthless, he is indefatigable in terms of how much effort he puts into ruling France, and he will establish a system. We'll get into this a bit more tomorrow. We're going to end now for today. He will establish a system in France that will strip the nobility of all their power, strip the clergy of all their power, strip the third estate of anything they've got, and all the power will reside in the body of Louis XIV, Le Roi de Soleil, the Sun King, and he will become the embodiment of absolutism. All right. Any questions? I mean, that was all a convoluted sort of contextual background for absolutism, but I think it's important to go through explaining how all these things connect. Any questions? No? All right. Here's what we're going to do then for today, folks. Let me go to present the entire screen. There. Click, share, hello, classwork. All right. I'm going to post a couple of things here for you now. All right. So this first one here is called The Rise of Absolutism in France. You're going to need this document tomorrow. You don't need it today, but this document will go into a bit more of a deep dive. So here we have the Henri IV. Here we've got Louis the 13th and Cardinal Richelieu, the thing I just explained to you in a bit more detail, right? What Cardinal Richelieu does, breaks the nobility, you know, promotes the French Navy, promotes French arts and culture, and so on. And here on the second page, we have some background on Louis the 14th. Who we will talk about in more detail tomorrow in the context of Peter the Great. But you're more than welcome to read through some of these details. These are some things that talk about the Palace of Versailles. What's going to be important for you when we get to tomorrow, and I'll explain this again in more detail, are some of the policies, some of the rationales, some of the things that Louis the 14th is going to do vis-a-vis Peter the Great. All right? But for you as well, I'm also going to post this, and normally in a regular class, what we would do is we would go through a PowerPoint on the Palace of Versailles, which is made up of a bunch of photographs of I've taken 4 student groups, I think, from Preston to the Palace of Versailles over the years. So most of these pictures in this PowerPoint are pictures from the times. There's young Louis the 14th. There's Louis the 14th when he is a young man, when he becomes the absolute ruler of France. And there is the standard picture of Louis the 14th as the absolute monarch, Louis the 14th, the Sun King. If you want, you're welcome to scroll through this. It just goes into some detail on the Palace of Versailles and what the Palace of Versailles looks like and so on and so forth. Have a look through that. Again, not as important for you for today. It will become important for you for tomorrow when we compare it to Peter the Great. Here's what I want you to do, though, for the rest of the day. And when you're done this, then whatever other time you've got is yours to work on your Elizabeth essay. So the Palace of Versailles, what's really important for you to note, I'm going to post this for you. Ping! The Palace of Versailles sets the stage for Louis the 14th. So again, this first one, you can look at now if you want. You don't need to. We can look at it tomorrow. This one, if you wanted to scroll through it to see the Palace of Versailles in some detail, you can. But we're also going to, this one here is the one I want you to do. The Palace of Versailles sets the stage for Louis the 14th. Louis the 14th is acting a role. the role of the absolute monarch, the role of the Sun King. So he's acting, he needs to act on a stage. The Palace of Versailles is that stage. He uses the palace to reshape French society into his vision. So all economic policy, all political policy, all social policy, all linguistic policy, all these things reflect the way that Louis XIV wants France to exist. And it will remain the benchmark for European standards of culture and etiquette and language and politics and everything else for the next 150 years until the French Revolution. So it's a very, very important palace in terms of the history of France, the history of absolutism, the history of the modern world. So what I want you to do is we're going to imagine that there's no COVID pandemic. We're going to imagine that I've won the lottery and we're all getting on a plane and we're going to the Palace of Versailles. So what you're going to be able to do here is wander the grounds of the Palace of Versailles and try and imagine what it would have been like to be there in the 1700s. Be there when Louis XIV is on the throne, or Louis XV, or Louis XVI. Try and grasp the awe and the majesty, the sheer magnitude of this particular palace, okay? Because this palace is the benchmark or is the basis of absolutism. It is also the symbol against which the French Revolution will be fought, what this palace stands for, all right? So now, what I want you to do is, there's a introductory video. Yeah, you don't have to worry about, no, this one I'm going to get rid of. That's me talking about, here's what I want you to do. Okay, let me edit this. Edit. Okay, well, actually, I'll leave it on there. This is just me from last year talking about the Divine Right of Kings. So ignore that. This introductory video right here, actually, I'm going to edit that. Just get rid of this because that's in a different tab. There we go. Save. Okay, so I want you to watch this introductory video right here, okay, on the Palace of Versailles. It's only 3 minutes long. It's not huge. And then what I want you to do is go through the Palace of Versailles website right here, which, in my opinion, is a great website because it allows you to look into all the different rooms, allows you to go into the gardens, allows you to see all the different things, and just imagine what this palace actually stood for. It is really, there's some cool videos on the Palace of Versailles. You can go into this deep rabbit hole if you want on all kinds of different things when you click on this website when it comes up. I'm going to hide this, okay? So you can browse the, yeah, I'll accept. You can browse the estate. You can go through the history of the palace. Okay, so there's Louis, and you can go down to Louis the 14th, Louis the 15th, Louis the 16th if you want. All these various things have got subsections where you can click. Note, right, here's Louis the 14th. Ooh, Tsar, Peter the Great. We're going to talk about him later on. This will allow you to look at the history of the rulers of France. The estate here will actually allow you then to go through, and you can click on with an interactive map. You can click on the parks. You can click on the estate of the Grand Trianon. You can go to the gardens. You can go to the palace. And so when you click on any of these, it will take you right into it. And so when you go here, you can click on any of these different links. You can click on Discover, and you can go through the palace itself. So the Hall of Mirrors, the Grand Trianon, you can look at the fountains. Just spend some time diving through this particular website. It is, and I know I'm a history geek, but this is a great website in a lot of different ways. So have a look through that. And then if you're more of a three-dimensional kind of person, then this is not as good as being there, but we're going to pretend that we're there. The Google Earth link to the Palace of Versailles is really, really neat as well. So if you click on this, what it will take you to, hopefully it's the right link. Sometimes these links change. Come on. It's taking its time. We'll see if it loads up. If not, I'll make sure that it's the right link later on. What this will allow you to do is walk through, because there's a guy who, or a girl, I don't know, people that wandered through the Palace of Versailles and then wandered through all the gardens with cameras. So you can actually scroll and on your own stroll through the palaces in three-dimensionality and see what they are like. This is not loading up for us, so I will alter that link and make sure that we can see it. I'll find it for you and change it for you in a second. So for the remainder of the morning, watch this video, go through this and look at some of the pictures and so on. I'll alter this link so you can actually see it. And then what I want you to do is wander through and you can see what the Palace of Versailles is like. Get a sense of that. The rest of the day is yours to work on Elizabeth the First, your essay. I will be online 12:30 until 1:30 in a optional Google Meet once again for you to tune into if you'd like to. Tomorrow what we're going to do, but please make sure that you look through the Palace of Versailles website and or the PowerPoint because tomorrow I'm going to have you as part of your second summative task. You're going to have to compare the reigns and the rules of Louis XIV and Peter the Great for a summative task. Okay, so today, remainder of the morning, go through the palace, watch the video, go through the palace. I'll fix the Google link for you so you can wander through and then work on your Elizabeth essay. Anybody wants to jump on 12:30 to 1:30, I'll be here live. Otherwise, tomorrow morning, bright and early, we'll start looking at Peter the Great and I will give you your second summative task. Okay? Have a great rest of the day, folks. I will see some of you at